Hi, I'm Naben Ruthnum. I won this year's Journey Prize for a story of mine called Cinema Rex, which means I get to inflict some of my taste on you. I'm going to start with this novel, A Beautiful Truth by Colin McAdam. This won this year's Rogers Writers Trust Fiction Prize, so I'm not alone in really loving it. I'm a bit of a chimp attack aficionado. I've followed a lot of these stories. I'm very interested in the people, particularly Americans, who bring these wild animals, chimpanzees, into their homes, frequently with very terrible, violent results. And Colin does a really sensitive and incisive job of showing you the psychology of a couple who do something like this, bring a chimp into their home, and even more impressively, he's got this fascinating, distant narrator who's able to really show you how sophisticated the minds and behaviors of the chimpanzees in the story themselves are. He doesn't crudely humanize the chimp characters, but he really shows you something about the way those animals exist. I thought it was fascinating. Very good. Secondly, I got this book. Trying to get the glare off the very shiny U of T press cover. It's called The Metaphor of Celebrity by Mr. Joel Deshay, a friend of mine, actually. The subtitle Canadian Poetry in the Public, 1955 to 1980, gives you a clue that it's a critical book. But Joel's a very skilled writer, and his prose never slips into that kind of sound that makes people say academic in a negative or dirty or terrified tone of voice sometimes. It's very well written, very entertaining. It's about the way in which writers, particularly in this book, Leonard Cohen, Irving Layton, Michael Ondaatje, and Gwendolyn McEwen, the way they were placed or constructed these celebrity other identities that were, in many ways, the way the public interacted with them, and that they interacted with the public. It's really interesting stuff if you often think of the way in which writers look to their public or publics look to their writers. And it's also got just a lot of fascinating historical detail and incidents from a really interesting time in Canadian lit history. Lastly, I've got these comic books. Prophet. Prophet is the only comic I buy monthly anymore, which means I don't have the trade paperback, and that's what I'm recommending that you get. The main creatives on this are Brandon Graham, the writer, and Simon Roy, who also collaborates in the writing, but is primarily just a really amazing artist. He's a Victoria-based fellow. His style reminds me a little of Moebius, whom I love. Moebius is responsible for a lot of the ways that science fiction movies these days look. But Simon Roy's art is very much his own thing. I can't really tell you how he's unique without revealing how awful I am at talking about visual art. So you're just going to have to take a look at it yourself in the comic book store. Store I'd recommend if you live here in Toronto, The Beguiling, my favorite place to go. In terms of the books, Type Books and Ben McNally here in Toronto are great. Where else have I lived in Canada? In Montreal, I always enjoyed Paragraph and The Word. On Vancouver, Pulp Fiction, of course, which I'll be going to this Christmas. And if you happen to have been from Kelowna, Mosaic Books is a great independent bookstore that's still around, and I also will be frequenting this season. Hope you enjoy the recommendations, and thank you for listening to me.